What's going on, guys? Let me fix the mic real quick. Okay, so today we're going to talk about a fragrance from the House of Mind Games. And there's some usual suspects online when it comes to Mind Games reviews, but I think I'm going to review a fragrance that people don't often talk about. Haven't seen a lot of content for it online, but strap up, grab a bev, let's take a ride. All right, welcome to the Scent Bubble. I am your host for the afternoon, and today from the House of Mind Games, we are going to talk about Jadoob. And I have a good amount of experience so far with Mind Games fragrances. I've worn about 3 of them so far, and I've tried about 6 of them. Now, there are a lot of Mind Games fragrances. So in one sense, I'm just getting started, but I feel like I have a lot of wearing experience with, for just introducing myself to a fragrance line. And one thing I could say about the Mind Games line is it is very sophisticated looking. It is super unique as far as their approach to fragrances. Everything seems to be dense. Everything seems to be multifaceted. It seems to be unisex, unlike most unisex fragrances that I'm familiar with, that seem like they have fairly simplistic DNAs and are just gender neutral. Whereas Mind Games kind of approaches it with a multifacetedness where it's like the fragrance has several complex elements that feel masculine, and the same can be said for feminine. And I think this fragrance is no different. Again, this is Jadoob, or no, I think it's Jadoob is how the representative of Mind Games, told me the fragrance. Let's get an initial thoughts on this. Again, I have worn it. I've had a few wearings with this fragrance. I'm almost out of juice, which means I have smelled it before. But again, Mind Games fragrances are so complex, I can't even remember what this fragrance entailed. I know it's a fruity fragrance, but that's not really saying much when it comes to Mind Games because there's so much more going on. So let's get an initial impression, of the fragrance. Okay, so what I remember right off the bat is saying, wow, this is fruity. What is that star note of fruit? And the answer is pomegranate. There is a rich photoreal rendering of pomegranate here. It's somewhat synthetic, like it almost borders pomegranate body mist, but it's very high quality, and I think they even take it further to feeling more fragrance-y without, less of a body mist or a diluted, water, for lack of better words. It's a very juicy, rich, slightly synthetic, but photoreal pomegranate. It's juicy, it's 3D, and it is up there. I can say, though, that it feels so dressed up behind it that you won't get a sense that it's super linear. There's just a lot to unpack. It's got a sweet yet sour feel to it. It's got a rich ripeness to it. It feels like there's like notes of, I don't know, maybe like leather, yet green, yet like aromatic, very woody in the base, ambery. Again, this is feminine leaning, though it's a unisex fragrance. And a lot of the Mind Games fragrances are kind of, the aesthetic of them is that they're all chess pieces, kind of these unisex chess pieces with really high-end bottles. It almost feels like, based off what these retail for, which is like $400 or $500, that $100 of it is going to the bottle presentation alone. Let's go ahead and take a look at this fragrance real quick. There's the bottle, very sophisticated, very nice. Definitely Mind Games fragrances are ones you'd want to put on your shelf. The description here, launched in 2022. Top notes are red currant, mandarin orange, middle notes pomegranate, and damask rose. That's what I was noticing. It does have a very kind of rose water-esque background behind the pomegranate, adding to that freshness. But then, interestingly enough, here's where the kind of the masculinity of the fragrance lies in the base with leather, patchouli, benzoin, and amber. And so we should see that down here, which we do. I'm not familiar with what the note of red currant is supposed to feel like, but the pomegranate is so rich and ripe. I guess you could make a case that there's some orange in here, but in a nutshell, to me, this is like photoreal pomegranate with a touch of fresh rose water behind it. And in the base, the leather, patchouli, amber, benzoin really just feels like about 20% of this fragrance. This is 80% pomegranate and damask rose. Very interesting fragrance. You know, it almost feels something like, again, this is very, I'm reaching here, but just to get you guys, wait, where's my webcam? There we go. Sorry about that, guys. Just to get you in the wheelhouse of kind of what I'm talking about here. This is similarly in some kind of arena of like a vintage radio, even though that's plum. It's in the arena of atomic rose from Initio. You know, just due to the rose influence. The pomegranate is the distinction as well as the base, but it's very fruity. It's got somewhat of a masculineness in the background, but I feel like this is feminine leaning. If you closed your eyes and you weren't reading the notes and you weren't looking at the bottle, you just tried the juice, you might feel like this is like a very expensive version of something you get at like a Bath and Body Works. You know, you can get like a pomegranate lotion type of thing. And this feels like the highest extent of that, very luxurious, very more expensive than. But again, because of that type of familiarity, it can feel cheap, like it's not worth that much money. But it certainly feels like it's at least like $150, $200 fragrance. $400 or $500, not so much. But it has some complexity. It's very high quality smelling. But after a while, I feel like upon the dry down, you just get this really fresh photoreal pomegranate and rose. And then everything in the background is just kind of tinging that a little bit to feel more cologne-y, if that makes sense. Some usual suspects here for information. I think a fragrance like this is very playful. I think upscale casual is the furthest it can go to formal. You know what I'm saying? This feels like just an expensive casual fragrance. Again, I don't really get the price point. I think most of that's going into the bottle and the aesthetic and maybe the quality of the ingredients. But as far as what the juice smells like and what you're getting, this feels pretty forward. I think in my wearing experience with this, and I've worn it now for like 3 days, I do enjoy the projection and sillage of this fragrance. I haven't received compliments, but I feel noticed wearing this fragrance. People have their eye on me. People kind of, you know, it does have some appeal to it. But I do think it's so feminine leaning. You'd have to be a pretty confident guy to rock something like this. Yeah, I mean, it's just, again, fresh pomegranate rose, but it's done in a very interesting way with a lot going on in the background. So it just kind of adds to the juiciness and the realness of those fruits. And I'm here for it. Is the fragrance worth it? No. Again, I think this is any season, any reason, any age. Again, occasions are going to be casual, like sophisticated rich person casual. Sprays on this, you know, one thing about most Mind Games fragrances is you don't have to spray it a lot. You know, 4 sprays will get the job done. A fragrance like this, you could easily go up to like 6 sprays if you want more performance out of it. But my performance was generally like solid 8-hour plus with performance. And throughout that performance, the projection and sillage pretty much remained. I wore this fragrance today and just now getting home at like 8, 9 o'clock at night, I still have sillage. So that's always a good thing. But again, I do think it's feminine leaning. There's not enough of the leather, patchouli, benzoin, amber to really push like what I feel would be like a balanced masculinity to this fragrance. That's why I think it's feminine leaning. Glorified, luxurious, expensive smelling pomegranate lotiony body spray, but it doesn't have a body spray texture to it. It does feel a lot thicker, does feel very eau de parfum at the very least, or even parfum concentrate. I'm giving this fragrance an 8 out of 10. It's above average. It's sophisticated. It's rich smelling, but there's not a lot of signature to it. There's not a lot of versatility to it. And it does reminisce a bit of a Bath and Body Works-esque type of DNA. So those are all things that kind of dock the points for me. I think I'm being gracious giving it an 8, but it just doesn't feel average enough to call it a 7. Again, feminine leaning. I think this would be a great fragrance on a female. On men, you're walking a thin line. Again, it's not insanely women only to my nose, but it does feel like pomegranate and rose at the end of the day. So take with it what you will. Again, this fragrance retails around $400 or $500. I went into Neiman Marcus and got like a 3 ml decant, so that allowed me to get a bunch of wearings. And I advocate for decants, guys. At the end of the day, just because you have the money doesn't mean you should blind buy fragrances. And also, just because you like a fragrance upon the test strip doesn't mean you should buy the fragrance either. You should always try, if possible, to get a wearing experience of some sort, to see what it does on your skin, to see its performance, and to see if what you initially thought is what remains after spending time with the fragrance. People who have money and buy bottles of fragrance because they can, to me, are idiots. Do what you will. It's your hobby, but there's no logic to that pathology of consuming that I think people can relate to in terms of being helpful for them to buy fragrances. Try your fragrances, test your fragrances, decant your fragrances, be sure that you love it, especially at this price point, and then feel free to pull the trigger. That way you have full confidence. A lot of times you just get into FOMO and you look behind you and you have a bunch of bottles that you barely wear because the fragrances that stand out to you the most are going to be the ones that you wear. And that's just how it is. Again, I feel like it's in the wheelhouse, this fragrance, of Atomic Rose. So the Atomic Rose connection on the cheap level is going to be something like Body Al Oud's Amethyst. It does feel more so like, Initio's Atomic Rose, like vintage radio-y, even though that's plum. So that's a cheaper fragrance. It does have a bit of side effect Initio-ness to it. So you've got like Infini Rose, you've got After Effect from, I believe, Maison Alhambra, something like that. So you got a couple of other options to get here, but I do think this quality is in such a way where most fragrances can only get about 80 to 85% close to this DNA. Anyways, sound off in the comments. Let me know if you've tried this fragrance, if you've had your eye on it. I know it's not the most popular. Most people, tend to lean towards Mentor, Double Attack, Checkmate, stuff like that. And we will cover those eventually. But that's my take for now. Like, comment, and subscribe. More importantly, turn on that notification bell so you can be up to date when we drop videos every single day. I hope this was helpful for you. Again, this was from the House of Mind Games, and this was Jadoub. And it's an 8 out of 10 for me, but feminine leaning as an 8 out of 10 fragrance. So men, tread with caution on a fragrance like this. And women, be sure that you absolutely love it before you spend that kind of dough on the fragrance. Because this just strikes me as the type of composition where you might get pretty darn close to it if you find a pomegranate lotion or body spray. So with that being said, this is the Scent Bubble. Hope you have a blessed week. Until next time.